My name is Angie Byron, or I go by webchick on most things like Twitter and Facebook and whatnot, except for Gmail. I don't know who webchick at Gmail is, but she must get a lot of really confusing emails that she doesn't understand. Um, so I'm here to talk a bit about, well, the talk is Drupal 9, just to scare the crap out of everybody, but basically talking a lot about Drupal 8 and the evolution of Drupal 8, kind of some best practices, advice kind of things, and then hopefully the talk will be pretty short, so there'll be lots of time for questions and answers. Because I wear many hats in the Drupal community. My slides want to work, ever? That'd be cool. There we go. And so if you have general community questions, you have where's the product going questions, you have what's up with the Drupal Association questions, you have any kind of questions that you can probably think of, I'll either know who to talk to about that, or I might know the answer myself. But anyway, happy to answer anything that you guys can bring up. So and everyone, not just guys. Anyway, all right. So to cover our agenda, and I just want to pause here. You can hear me okay, and the slides relatively work with when I'm showing them. Yep. Thumbs up. Okay, cool. So going to give a brief overview of Drupal, really high level for people who don't maybe know what it is very much yet. We'll talk about a history and evolution of Drupal releases over time, and then how we got to where we are now with Drupal 8 and how that's going to affect things in the future. And then I'll sort of close it out with like, here's some helpful links that you should know about and some tags and stuff like that. And hopefully that will be useful for people in the room. So Drupal, I like to say Drupal is three things. Drupal is, first of all, it's a flexible framework. Drupal is the kind of thing where I really like using it because I had a lot of like customers who didn't know what they wanted, and they thought they wanted a little, static website, and it turns out they also wanted an e-commerce thing, and then they wanted a forum and all that kind of stuff. What I love about Drupal is that you can build something out for a customer their needs today, and then build it out to do anything that they need in the future. Usually by checking a checkbox, not always. It's also really great at integrating with other systems and pulling things together. It can work on mobile applications like USB drive things, all kinds of stuff. So Drupal is fantastic for that. My favorite thing about Drupal is this amazing community. So if you didn't get a chance to meet people at dinner last night and the party, I really encourage you to reach out today and tomorrow, because there's some really fantastic people, particularly in this local community, who've been doing Drupal a long time and love to share what they know and that kind of stuff. One of my favorite things about the Drupal community is in a lot of communities, sort of like this one-upmanship where like, oh, I know, I wrote the blah, blah, blah library, so I'm the best or whatever. And in Drupal, it's really not like that. It's like, oh, you don't know about the blah module. Well, let me tell you about it because it's awesome, I love that about our community. And the community is also huge and growing. We've got about 30,000 active developers. We have about 4,700 of those are contributing to core. We have, thousands of modules, all kinds of stuff available for people who are looking to make it work. We also are we tend to be at the cutting edge of technology. So something Drupal has always done is explore kind of edge case cool initiatives, even if they didn't ultimately end up going anywhere, or even if they were supplanted eventually by something else. We really like to always be on the cutting edge of technology, whether that's OpenID back in the day that we pursued, or some of the stuff around GraphQL, which is this cool graphing, library to do all kinds of crazy REST API queries or whatever it is. We generally are, a community of technologists who really enjoy chasing whatever the newest thing is. And that served us really well in that our CMS is, as of a couple weeks ago, like 17 years old or something crazy. So it's a really old piece of technology, but it doesn't feel like an old piece of technology because of the fact that we've always been able to stay relevant and current. But that drive towards staying current on the cutting edge of technology does come to bite us in places too, so we'll talk about that. An overview of Drupal 8. Drupal 8 shipped in November of 2015, so a couple years back, with all kinds of new stuff in it. Drupal 8 is really the first release of Drupal that really doubled down on like, let's make sure everything that you need is there So you have things like the views module, which allows you to create custom dynamic listings of stuff, multilingual capabilities, HTML5 support. We did a lot of work on the front end to make it mobile friendly, and make it easy to use for content authors, or at least easier to use than any previous version, and all this kind of stuff. And then since then, we've only improved the software, and we do it every 6 months in release cycles, and we'll talk about that too. So I did a little survey informally on Twitter a couple of months back, asking people what their favorite part of Drupal 8 was. And they basically came back with 3 things that they love about Drupal 8 as compared to Drupal 7. One of the things that was a major undertaking in Drupal 8 was rewriting all of the underlying functionality to be object-oriented PHP. And that was a huge risk we took, because, you know, like everyone before had just known, like, you know, procedural functions, big module files like this big that you copy and paste things out of. And what we attempted to do here, again, in that, you know, chasing the cutting edge of technology, is really meet the rest of the PHP world and really the rest of the development world where they are, which is using all kinds of, you know, modern design patterns and this kind of stuff. And the end result is the code is cleaner, it's well structured, it's improved consistency a great deal. We now have much better test coverage for all of this stuff to ensure our quality stays high. And it's getting easier to approach Drupal from another system and understand how it works, versus before, Drupal people definitely were like Drupal people, and it was very difficult for the concepts in Drupal to translate back and forth between systems. So that's one of the things people brought up over and over again. The second thing is the improved theming system. In Drupal 8, we shipped with a library called Twig, which allows you to keep your template files, which affect how things appear on the page, almost exclusively markup related. And then there's a bunch of nice features like inheritance and overrides to allow you to minimize the amount of code you need to maintain your theme. But people seem to love that quite a bit. There's also greatly enhanced security. It's really, really, really difficult now to accidentally make an XSS vulnerability or a custom theme, versus before that was very easy, because you had to know a lot of different special functions and stuff like that. So Twig overall, that was a huge win. And the last thing is the configuration management system in Drupal 8. So Drupal 8 ships with the ability to export your configuration into little files, YAML files, and those can then be managed and moved across different environments, versus before, everything was kind of stuffed in the database along with your content and your configuration. And the downside of that is that if you wanted to, you know, deploy I changed the site name up here. If you just took the database and moved it for sale, you'd risk losing content or users that are registered since the last time, or these kinds of things. So that separation and the fact that that's built into the framework now is really, really helpful, because it means all, you know, from core to control and everything all follows the same pattern. Any other people want to shout out stuff they like about Drupal 8? I'm sure we can all find things we don't like about Drupal 8, but we're trying to keep it upbeat. So, anyone?
Anything? Oh, headless.
Headless, yeah.
Composer.
Composer.
Plugin system.
The plugin system, nice. Yeah. Headless Drupal refers to the fact that in Drupal 8 with the REST API, it's now a lot easier to write, to keep Drupal basically behind, you know, the scenes as like where you make your content, store your content, and organize your content, and all that kind of stuff. But the front end can be whatever you want. It could be a React application, it could be a kiosk in a mall somewhere, or anything like that. So it's called like a headless build, and Drupal 8 definitely supports that much better than any release in the past. Although, you know, we've been able to do that since Drupal 4 or something. But having it innately built in the framework is really great. Composer is sort of the, again, with adopting best practices from the PHP world, that's become kind of the de facto way of managing dependencies, similar to like how Node.js has NPM and Perl has CPAN, if we want to go back to really old people. Just kidding, but that's been really great to have Drupal 8 adopting those best practices, although we're still kind of, I think we're still in this kind of wishy-washy middle ground where we're like still have tarballs, but also Composer, you know, like this kind of thing. So I'm hoping some of that will get worked out soon. And the last one there was plugins. Yeah. Yeah, plugins is cool. It's like a kind of a meta API for any kind of thing that gets extended in different directions. So, blocks can be plugins because you have one or more blocks and they all behave a certain way. Or, input formats can be plugins, this kind of stuff. And it was an interesting addition to Drupal 8 because it made kind of this new like meta system to kind of learn that was a little intimidating for people. But then once you learned it, it was like all of a sudden like 90% of Drupal made sense to you because it all sort of leads into the same thing. So great to hear that that's making its way out in the real world as well. My favorite thing about Drupal 8 is that you can actually build real actual sites out of the box. This is the mockups from the out of the box initiative, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But in Drupal 7, it was not possible to make a site that looked like this without downloading at least 20 contributed modules. In Drupal 8, everything you need is included. You write the theme, you get the content all started, and you're good to go. So that's probably my most exciting thing about Drupal 8. In terms of Drupal 8's current status, we have a maturing controlled ecosystem. This is a slide I totally stole from Jesus' presentation in Vienna a couple months back. The current numbers are 1,700 stable projects and 4,700 under development. So anyway, Drupal momentum is going up. Every time we get a stable release of a module, it builds a foundation of more modules. And at this point, I would say if people aren't adopting Drupal 8, at least I'm not aware of the contributed module ecosystem being the biggest problem. There might be a one-off module like rules or something that doesn't work for them, but apart from that, it seems like it's pretty straightforward. Drupal 8 is now also the go-to release for most agencies. So last year there was a business survey done of all the shops in Europe and the United States and stuff like that, and the tipping point hit where Drupal 8 is definitely the thing that most people are using at this point. There's tons of success stories. Probably my favorite one here is the YMCA. They're using Drupal 8 as a basis for their OpenY distribution. And this allows them to drastically cut IT costs in all of the local, smaller communities in favor of some of the bigger communities, kind of creating this like templated system. And every dollar that they save in IT costs, of course, goes to helping kids. And who can be against helping kids? That's really, really awesome. So I love, it's great that NASDAQ uses Drupal to make money or whatever, but I really love, like a really good social organization that makes use of Drupal because that feels good, for the work that we all do. So I'll pause that section of the thing and get into a history of Drupal and release management. Does anyone have any questions about an overview of Drupal 8, how it works, some basic questions about that kind of stuff? Or is it better, Amber, if I save questions to the end from a logistics point of view?
Probably let's save questions for the end. So if you've got a question, write it down and we'll get to it.
I do care about what you think. I just can't ask you. So yeah. Just kidding. All right. So we'll launch into this then. So traditionally, here's some of the release cycles of Drupal, Drupal 5, Drupal 6, Drupal 7, Drupal 8. So we used to be able to churn out a release of Drupal in about a year, like Drupal 5 took us from, I think it was February 2006 till January 2007. Drupal 6 took us from January 2007 to February 2008. And all of a sudden, Drupal 7, our development cycle expanded out way further than that. So we didn't actually release Drupal 7 until January of 2011, which was like 3 years after Drupal 6 came out. And there was a lot of reasons for that. We were trying to overcome a lot of the limitations. We wanted to put automated testing in there so we could refactor code without breaking things. We wanted to get some like admin usability stuff in there because we knew Drupal was really difficult to use for people, and all kinds of other things. And it ended up taking a really long time. And then Drupal 8 didn't come up until November of 2015. So you can see how these lines are getting further and further apart in terms of where they stood. And once again, because we had big, ambitious goals we were trying to get in. The disadvantage to this approach, well, there's many disadvantages to this approach, but the main one was you had no idea when new functionality would be coming down the pipe. And if you're a core developer, you have no idea when the stuff you work so hard on is going to see the light of day. So this kind of frustrated and burnt out everybody. So that it's done when it's done mentality that we used to have was no good for, core developers, for people trying to plan out migrations for other kinds of things. Also, the fact that we only innovated on these major release cycles meant that you'd be waiting 4 years plus for a new feature in Drupal core, which was, you know, never a long time. Yeah, that's way too long to wait for new features. And then we have this philosophy in each of these major releases of we'll break your code and not your data. And what that meant is it allowed us to stay on that cutting edge of technology, so we'd always have the latest and greatest APIs. However, every major release, pretty much every single module would have to get rewritten from scratch. And there's a big lag that happens. And for Drupal 8, we're just recently coming out of that lag. So that would cause people to lag behind on the older releases, which means they're waiting even longer than 4 years for new features, and it was just kind of a horrible situation. So in Drupal 8, this is what we do instead. So every 6 months, we put out a new, what's called a minor release of Drupal, so 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, etc. And each one of these is a point at which we can add new features to the CMS, which is awesome. But don't also break all of your code along with it. So in theory, these should all be backwards compatible with each other, which means if you build a module in 8.2, as long as you're using the stable core code and you're not delving into internal stuff, you should be good to go, and that should continue to work throughout the rest of the Drupal 8 cycle. So this is really, really important for people who are trying to build websites with Drupal. Jumping on the Drupal 8 train helps you a lot because it gets you on this thing that will be perpetually, you know, maintained and upgraded and have new capabilities until such time we can't put new capabilities in. So that key thing with backwards compatibility between those releases is really, really important because it means while you can adopt new, better APIs at your leisure, you don't have to, and it won't break your site if you don't touch your module. We also are introducing the concept of an LTS release and a security fixes only stage, which is effectively what Drupal 7 is in right now. So we're going to keep putting out these Drupal 8.1, 2, 3 releases until we essentially run out of runway. And then at that point, Drupal 8 will transition to an LTS release, which means we won't be adding any more features. It'll just be bug fixes. And then eventually after that, when Drupal 9 comes out, we would transition to security fixes only. So if people want I really seriously never need to touch this thing kind of experience with Drupal 8, the LTS release would offer that. We've also transitioned to better innovation through the use of experimental modules. So one of the problems with the contributed ecosystem, so Drupal, for those who are new to Drupal, Drupal has thousands of modules you can use. They have everything from like change your entire site to pirate speak because it's talk like a pirate day, to, you know, like robust layout systems to kind of you name it, you know, like random, you know, new startup thing just started, Snapchat, whatever. Oh, here's a module that integrates with it, that kind of stuff. But the problem is because there's like thousands of modules, nobody knows what they are and what they do and what the best thing. Like if you want to have a rating system for your website, there's like, I don't know, 12 choices of which ones to use, and it's really difficult to ascertain which is which and which is the best. And these kind of infrastructure modules, like the views module that everything else builds off of, are really difficult to find in amongst all the other stuff. And so something we've started doing is adding so-called beta modules to Drupal. So these are things that we want to eventually ship as core functionality out of the box, but you get kind of like a sneak preview of them and find out if they work for you or not, and are able to give early feedback into that process. And so at the moment, these all have kind of gone, sorry if you guys need this one. But anyway, so alpha, beta, stable. So as you can see, most of the stuff that we put in this experimental is stable at this point, and that means it's in there just as part of the software. You can use it, you know, for whatever you like. But we have a couple that are still hanging out in alpha and beta. One big change we've made as of the 8.5 release cycle, and 8.5 will ship March 7th, I want to say. One major change there is that we no longer will ship with alpha level modules because there's some people in the audience who adopted Drupal 8 early and kind of go about the idea of experimental modules because when something is alpha, we don't care about preserving backwards compatibility and stuff like that. And that was difficult for people to reconcile because the rest of core is very stable and backwards compatible, and then this one tiny part wasn't. And so we've made a policy change where we no longer ship with anything but beta level stability or higher. experimental code, and that means that your data model is preserved, so there'll be an upgrade path between versions, and there should be backwards compatibility provided. So, yeah, so that's a couple of examples of us kind of changing, what we do in response to market feedback. So the benefits of all of this is you have a predictable release cycle that both end users and core developers can plan around. So you know in advance, okay, well, there's going to be a new release on this date, and the alpha is going to come out here, so I should probably start paying attention at that point. You get new functionality in a much shorter time window. You're not stuck with like ancient versions of jQuery that no longer are supported and probably ridding with security holes. We, as core developers, get the opportunity to get end user feedback and evolve features over time. So we don't have to ship something perfect the first time. We can ship it in a, we think this will work, what do you think state, and then refine it based on actual feedback instead of like 6 core developers arguing with each other in node 1, 2, 4, 5. And the really great thing is that Drupal 9, when Drupal 9 eventually comes out, is going to be just one of these normal minor releases. So it'll have the BC layers dropped, but apart from that, it will just be, it's another 6 months release cycle. It's another minor version with a couple of features, and that's it. So if you get on the Drupal 8 train, that will keep you going for Drupal 9, 10, etc. as those things progress. A lot of times people ask, well, when will we do Drupal 9? And I'll talk about that in a second, but basically a visual representation of this is every time we add new stuff to Drupal 8, we have to keep this deprecated backwards compatibility layer system. We do that over the course of many releases, and then eventually when Drupal 9 ships, it's just going to remove all of that. So if you're the kind of person who's conscientious about your module, and every 6 months you're updating it to the newest stuff, you're not going to have to do any work. Someone else who hasn't touched their module since 8.2 might have to do some more work, but the bottom line is a module, at least early days, should be able to work in both 8 and 9, no problem. So that's also a new thing for us. There's a bunch of prerequisites in order to open up Drupal 9. They're all listed in this issue here, if you guys care to check it out. Mainly, we want to do things like make sure all of the testy BC code from Drupal 7 is ripped out. There's still some procedural functions in there. We want to make sure that we have our testing harness up to speed. That can do all that kind of stuff. We want to make sure 8 to 8 migrations work because that will be 8 to 9 migrations. There's a ton of stuff in here that all need to be worked on. So we're not in any danger of moving to Drupal 9 yet, but there's been talk about maybe doing that, if and when we do support for Symfony 3, which Drupal 8 has parts based on and stuff like that. So. But at any rate, if you want to keep up to date on when or if that's happening, go ahead and go to that node. But for everybody else, you can assume they're going to be shipping Drupal 8 releases for at least the next couple of years. So yeah. Putting all this into practice, so that was a lot of information dump. So for people who actually maintain sites and want to know how does this affect me and how can I not get surprised and that kind of stuff. This is the first link I wanted to show. This is like knowing the release cycle. So this tells you all the important dates of when things are getting released and that kind of stuff. I think as a site builder or a site owner, probably the most important thing is when alpha gets released, that's a really good time to start paying attention. That would be a great time to set up a dev environment and get a copy of your site up and running on that with a newer version of Drupal that's coming out, because that's the best time to give feedback because there's still like 3 months for us to fix whatever's wrong with it. By beta 1, that's effectively like it's feature frozen. Whatever we were going to get into is already in there. And at that point, support for the previous version starts winding down. So that's a good time to definitely have your dev environment be testing things accurately, that kind of thing. Then the actual release happens, roughly 2 months after the alpha. And that will mark the end of life of the previous Drupal 8 version, but you still have approximately 3 weeks or something to do the migration to 8.5 in this case. Because after that point, after the security window, then we will start disclosing any security vulnerabilities that only affected 8.4 publicly. So it's good to stay on the latest version of Drupal 8 at all times. And here's that in graphical form. So we have a development cycle, cut in alpha. When we cut in alpha, the next version is immediately open for development, so we can continue developing features all the way We have an alpha, beta, and IC phase, and then finally shift into supported release, and that happens until the next supported release. Question? Nope, we're not doing questions. But anyway, if you have questions on this part, feel free to tell me at the end. But, yeah. So here are the next Drupal 8s coming soon to a site near you. So 8.5.0 gets released March 7th, 8.6.0 gets released September 5th, and 8.7.0 is getting released on March 6th of next year. So we already have those things mapped out. The one caveat that might throw something into the works is there's a session that's been proposed for DrupalCon Nashville, so like in April, that's talking about shortening these release cycles because from a core developer point of view, it is soul crushing when you work your butt off in order to get something into a release and you miss the deadline and now you wait 9 months in order to get it into the next version. There's also, it's challenging for site owners to be able to make that jump to the new version immediately. So there's been some talk about negotiating this between the security team, the core developers, end users, that kind of thing, to see if we can shorten those releases, but maybe maintain security support for longer, like one release previous or something. So expect that to be a lively discussion that's coming soon to to a conference meeting. What I would also recommend if you're maintaining a site is keep abreast of the forthcoming changes. So if we do make any backwards compatibility changes or version number changes of different dependent libraries or anything that could kind of affect a site builder, it'll be listed on this list changes page. And this is also tweeted out on the, I think it's called Drupal Changes Twitter. So there's lots of different ways to keep abreast of this. This is a very like loud medium, like there's a lot of information here that isn't always relevant to your site. But it's good to kind of keep on top of it just so you know what people are working on. This is probably a better medium for people who aren't hardcore, you know. This is where we'll announce huge things like we're dropping support for PHP 5 in March of 2019. And, you know, here's a new release candidate that you should check or this kind of thing. So this is like a lower volume kind of announcement list that will tell you kind of important things for you to know throughout core development. It's also really good to understand what backwards compatibility means because it doesn't mean we won't ever break anything ever. It does mean that we cordon off specific parts of the system and say, this is safe, this is safe, this is safe. And as long as you're relying on those, you're fine. And if you're not, then you could be in a danger zone. One example of that I can think of off the top of my head is in Drupal 7, to an extent, but really not since Drupal 6, it was sort of considered okay to like query the database correctly or directly in order to get information out of it. In Drupal, you don't want to do that anymore. You want to use the actual APIs for things. So the configuration API in the case of settings, the entity API in case of content, and these kinds of things. Because if you are directly querying the database, they could break because we do change, like we consider like column names, database table names, stuff like that, internal API stuff that we can control. Versus the APIs that we use to query that information will never change. So just things like that to be aware of. So this is a good page to browse through and make sure that your custom code is not doing anything untoward that could land you in a bit of trouble, you know, between 8.5 and 8.6. There's also release notes that go out every release. They spend a lot of time on these, like hours on these. So please read them because they include important information you should know. Like, you know, you have to upgrade to this version of Drush or whatever, that kind of stuff. Anything that we think could cause people a problem, we try to call out in the release notes immediately so that you can be aware of them and kind of account for them in your site builds. You can also keep track of like the future Drupal development at the core/roadmap page. So this is where we document here are the major initiatives we have on the go, here are the goals that we're trying to accomplish in those, and this kind of stuff. And I have a section where I could run through this quickly for people who aren't aware of what these initiatives are and what they're about. So you can talk about what's coming down the pipe. Drupal 8.5.0 just got, it just went into code freeze the middle of January, so not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago. We're still in that weird middle ground between alpha and beta, so there's still a chance that some more stuff could get in, but it's very narrow window, and basically that window closes for good on Tuesday, and then everything else is going into 8.6. So we know that content moderation and settings tree were marked stable. We've enabled the big pipe module and standard profile, so that will result in a lot better perceived end user performance out of every Drupal build, so that's fantastic. We've added support for video and audio tags, so that's great from a media perspective. Updated to Symfony 3.4. That's kind of a big shift. We were at 3.2, we went to 3.4, so I would recommend testing 8.5 and make sure that it doesn't mess up anything on your sites, although it shouldn't, because we always take good precautions to make sure BC is preserved, but you never know. Lots of REST API improvements, particularly in the area of performance and also test coverage. We upgraded to PHP Unit 6, which will run conditionally for sites that offer PHP 7.2 plus, so that's the latest version of our testing framework. And once again, dropping support for PHP 5 in March of next year. So it's just something to be aware of if you're still on PHP 5. PHP themselves is dropping support for that very soon, if not already. So it'd be good to move to 7, not only from a security point of view, but also from a performance point of view. It's way better on pretty much everything, but especially after getting the code. And then in terms of tags to watch out for, I listed 2 of them there. There's 8.5.0 release notes and 8.5.0 highlights. Anytime we have an issue that we think either is a gotcha for site builders or something we really want to make sure we sing the praises of in the release notes, they'll be tagged with one of those or both. So that would be a good thing to keep in mind. In terms of what's possibly in it, these are 3 things that I want to caution probably won't make it into 8.5, but could if anyone's looking for anything to sprint on. So Layout Builder has 1 blocker. It's already been committed to 8.6. This is a really awesome initiative where you can add sections and then populate the sections with blocks, and it's all draggy, droppy, and it's like, wow, it's so awesome. The Umami demo is the out-of-the-box initiative. This is the one that makes it so that when you install Drupal, you have a choice of using, instead of standard or minimal, it just gives you a blank site that says, you don't have any content yet. They instead are going to actually ship Drupal showing what Drupal can do. So we're hoping that that will be a really great uptick for our adoption numbers and stuff like that. So that's in 8.6 already, or if they want to get it in 8.5, there's still 5 blockers there. And then we added the media module in 8.4, which is a media API module. But we were not comfortable allowing site builders to even turn it on because it resulted in some very funky UX interactions, particularly when file and image are thrown in there as well. But the media team worked really hard on that over the 8.5 cycle and got rid of almost all of them. We have 1 more blocker there as well. So if anyone is looking for things to work on this weekend, let me know. So running down the major initiatives, the migrate initiative is the #1 priority because if people can't migrate to Drupal, they can't use Drupal 8 if they're already using Drupal, which is sad. The current status of that as of last week is we've marked the migrate API stable, so that's a big deal. There's 2 other modules on there, migrate Drupal, which handles the 6 to 8 and 7 to 8 migrations, and the migrate Drupal VI, which is the user interface for it. Those are I don't see a reason those would not hit beta in Drupal 8.5. So that's great because they're currently out there. And the main thing I want to communicate about the migrate initiatives, even though those modules aren't marked stable yet, basically the migration team considers the migration API top to bottom stable at this point. If you're not using a multilingual site. If you're using a multilingual site, there's still some potential data loss issues, particularly regarding like entity reference type of fields, like terms, that kind of stuff. So those open issues are why this hasn't been marked stable yet. But if you're not on a multilingual site, which somewhere around 85 to 90% of sites aren't, then this should work great for you. And there's Drush support, and this team's been working a really long time to try and get this ready. So we're hoping to do some kind of announcement to the fact that you can use it after this, in 8.5. The media initiative is another major initiative. A lot of their work this release was kind of behind the scenes, so trying to get media API to a stable place, exposing it in the modules UI. And then next up, they're hoping to do a lot more end-user focused functionality. So bulk uploads of media, remote video support, a media library so you can pick and choose from what media that you've already uploaded, and all these kinds of things. I should point out for people who are new to Drupal, all of this stuff exists in Contrib already. but we're talking about making it part of the core offering, so you don't need to know about the NAD browser module and the media entity module and like all these other things. So this is particularly around core, but I don't want to give the impression here that Drupal doesn't do media, because it does it just fine. So that initiative I'm really excited about. They've got a lot of work slated up for 8.6, so that'll be really nice. The API First initiative has done most of their work on stabilizing the API, greatly expanding the test coverage, closing silly bugs that have kind of plagued the thing for a while, that kind of stuff. In 8.6, they're targeting file upload support JSON API, which is kind of a common format that most JavaScript developers expect to get things in, as opposed to HAL JSON, which was very cool like 3 years ago when we were developing this. So, and then in the future, config entity support, validation, GraphQL to allow it to streamline REST queries, that kind of stuff. So this team has a lot on the go. Really exciting initiative, though, particularly because someone started out headless. So if that was you, you should help with this initiative. The layouts initiative, as I mentioned, provides drag and drop layout builder thing. It was committed to 8.5, but didn't quite make the deadline as a beta module, so it's in 8.6 at the moment. And this works for both content-wide. So in other words, you can say, I want all of my articles to be laid out in the following manner, you know, with the hero image here and the this. And you can also do page-specific overrides. So if you want to create a landing page, kind of one-off marketing and promo or something like that, you can also do that as well. So that's really exciting. The workflow initiative is working on, you know, basically the ability to do something other than published and unpublished in Drupal. So we're shipping with content moderation, the draft, save as draft functionality stable as of 8.5. And then there's some really cool advanced workflow stuff that that team is working on with the workspaces module. And what this effectively lets you do is, instead of just previewing a piece of content on its own, you can queue up buckets of content. So not just this article, but this article with that sidebar block and this header ad and this kind of stuff. And then do alternate as well. So you can say, you know, if Hillary Clinton wins the election, we want this kind of thing, you know, with like Republicans crying in their soup. And if Donald Trump wins the election, we want this kind of thing with like, you know, screaming horror. Just kidding. Okay, but yeah, that kind of stuff. So that's a really great feature when it's finished. It's active in Contrib right now, but when that's built into the software itself, that's going to be fantastic, because I think it's really a key differentiator that Drupal has that I've not seen in many other systems. So yeah, that's a really exciting initiative as well. Outside in is the ability to click around on your site and make changes directly from there. It's trying to prevent content authors from being required to understand the Drupal information architecture and to know that views is under structure, and but email templates are under configuration or whatever. It's just like point them out, the stuff they can see on the page right when they can see it, let them click it, edit it, go back to what they were doing. And so this one's going to wrap up in 8.5, it looks like, which is really exciting. And then, yeah, we'll go from there. And then the out-of-the-box initiative, as I mentioned, this is creating a little demo content site for Drupal out of the box. It uses a lot of like key Drupal differentiators, so like the ability to do relationships between content, the ability to put multiple fields on content, the ability to show content in different ways with the views module and that kind of stuff. So this team has done a freaking phenomenal work. And their stuff is already checked into 8.6, so one way or the other will ship in September. But they're just really, really hoping to get it in 8.5 as well, because the team just really rallied. And one of my favorite contribution stories is in this initiative, because we had the screenshot you see here uses these like this sample imagery, from whatever stock photo site. And we had a question about like, well, can we actually use that or not in GPL software? Like, are we going to run into license issues? I don't know. And so to get around that problem, over Christmas break, the lead designer's wife sat and cooked every single one of these recipes so they could take their own photos of them, and then we don't have this issue anymore. And I just thought that was fantastic, that we get the whole family involved in getting these Drupal initiatives out the doors. So, so anyway, I just thought that was an awesome thing. And then on the horizon, so we don't yet have a full roadmap developed for these initiatives, but they're currently either in planning or kind of doing the groundwork. We've got JavaScript modernization. This is attempting to incorporate the React library into Drupal and use it for nicifying the admin interface to, modernizing that, making it responsive and, a lot more streamlined, that kind of stuff. Automated updates. Upgrading Drupal still remains one of the kind of hairiest things that people do. And, Dries is really pushing for us to go towards a modern, kind of meeting user expectations there, starting with security updates, trying to get those turned out on an automatic basis, but then eventually allowing, potentially contributed modules, maybe even core itself to be updated and bug fixed. Really, we'll have to see how that goes. But that's a really exciting initiative, and will probably also walk hand in hand with us fixing our composer to be all nice. So that's good too. The theme component library will probably go hand in hand with the JavaScript modernization library. It's the ability to utilize kind of web components in various interfaces that you build, so you don't have to reinvent the wheels all the time. You can use this button here, here, or here, and it combines together for you. And then the data modeling initiative is also floating around out there. There's no one actively working on that at the moment, but it's one of Drupal's key strengths, the ability to create these content types, focused on specific areas, while with discrete fields that can mix and match in any way. And it's definitely the case that if we were better about espousing that Drupal did that, and the interface for it was really slick and awesome, that we'd be in a much better shape for competing against, like the Contentfuls and the WordPresses of the world. So those are all really exciting things as well. But I wanted to hasten to point out these things don't happen without help. So, a lot of people think that there's like a Drupal company, and then the Drupal company does the development and makes these features happen, just like there's a Microsoft company that makes things happen in Windows. But Drupal is actually a very, very open source project. So the things that happen either because somebody was motivated to work on it because they thought it was cool or interesting, or because their boss told them to do it, or because, they ran into it on a client site and they don't want to fix that bug a second time, or whatever it is. But these things don't happen without help, and help includes everybody in this room and outside of it as well. And when I say getting involved, I don't want to make it just about code, because actually there's numerous ways to get involved that have to do with that. Are you, Amber, is there sprinting going on at this event? Or is it kind of throughout the event? Yeah. Oh, did I catch you off?
Yes, we have. I'm on my way.
Asleep, and she's like, "Oh yeah."
I have my Superman shirt on, but I don't have super speed. So, yes, we do have sprinting available.
Cool. So that's a great time to like sit down, right next to the person who wrote whatever module that you use, or who's working on that super interesting problem over there, and really get to meet people face to face, and not in a I'm yakking at you from the front of the room kind of perspective. So, highly encourage you to show up there with whatever skills it is that you have, particularly if it's like I have a version of IE I could test that with, because none of us have that, so that would be really helpful. Or if you're into usability testing, design, anything like that, we would love to talk to you. There's a few people in the audience who listen to all of this that I say, and they're like, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but I'm 7, so what do I do about this? And I would say that if Drupal 7 is working for you, that is fine. You can stay there until Drupal 9. But if Drupal 8 offers the features that you want, you might want to consider earlier adoption, because it gets you on this escalator with the 6-month feature release cycles, this is where all of the development activity is happening, with the content or configuration management system, with the object-oriented code that you're going to have to learn at one point anyway, like all this kind of stuff. So if it works out that, the customer you're working for is like, we need a big redesign of whatever, it might be a good opportunity to check out Drupal 8 and see if it works. But I want to hasten to add, like, Drupal 7 is fine. Nobody's dropping support for Drupal 7. It's all good. So that would be good for you. If you do want to move from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, we have this project on Drupal.org called the Contrib Tracker that you can use to track whatever modules that you have installed on your site and whether or not they're available for Drupal 8, and if so, in what capacity. We also have an upgrade guide that allows you to use the migration path. So some really nice documentation in there. I'm not sure who wrote that documentation, but it's excellent. That talks about how to actually move your site from one to the other. The nice thing about the migration path is that you'll keep your Drupal 7 site up and running as long as it needs to be with no changes, and you'll build out your Drupal 8 site separately. And then after you've tested the migration several times, then you'll go ahead and just flip the DNS to the other one. And so the downtime in doing an upgrade from 7 to 8 is much, much more minimal than in the past, where we would run a lot of very hairy database queries against your production website, which was always very scary. So yeah, so my closing, I would say, don't delay, try Drupal 8 today. Haha, because I'm very cheesy like that. But yeah, I'm very gung-ho on Drupal 8. It's taken a while to get to the point where, you know, it feels like it's reaching critical mass and we're starting to get the features in that people care about, but it's actually a really, really exciting time, and I'm super stoked on it. So yeah, it would be great to for you to join us. And now we'll transition to questions.
Thank you, Angie. Can you guys hear? Is this mic loud enough in the back? Can we hear okay? So if you've got a question for Angie, I would appreciate it if you would make your way up to the front so that she can see you. And can you see? Hi. She can see you and you can ask her question.
Great. Hi, Angie. This is Andre from Performant Labs. And so I just went and I took a look at the Linux report from last year. And in 1 year, they had 4,300 developers contribute to core. Or sorry, to the kernel. And I think you said Drupal has 4,700 contributing to core?
Either 47 or 42. I might have messed that up. Let's find out.
Well, it doesn't need to be exact, but just to say that this is one of the world's most successful open source projects, and the largest too. So that's one thing. But now the other thing is that it was really fun watching the number of critical issues go down to zero leading up to the launch of Drupal 8. But when we launched, I think it still had 530 major issues. And I just checked, I think that's up to 770 and something like 3,000 normal issues. It seems like the technical debt is growing. What is the thinking around that? How eventually it's going to get maybe just too damn high, yes?
Yeah, I mean, just as there's people on my side of things trying to put more features into places, there's also people on the release management side of things trying to do the opposite and pay down the technical debt. So some things that we do to combat the technical debt aspect of things. One thing I want to caution about numbers like that is when people use software, they will report bugs about it. So like a module having a higher bug count doesn't necessarily indicate it's a crappy module. It means someone actually uses it and paid attention because most software has bugs in it. So I don't get too rattled, I guess, about the number of bugs going up because the number of people using Drupal 8 now as compared to 3 years ago is completely a different number. So I would say that from the outset. But yeah, we definitely have noticed that, you know, it's just a matter of things. If we add more features to things, you have more lines of code and therefore more opportunities for bugs and interactions and stuff. So some things that we do on the core team to combat technical debt is twice a month we do this critical and major triage calls. And that gets all the core developers on the phone along with if we're doing something specifically for, like, say, the entity field system or the theme system or that kind of thing. We try and work with the subsystem maintainers of those in order to triage bugs, figure out, like, okay, that's a duplicate of this one. That one's not actually critical. That could just be a normal thing, and here's a workaround for that, this sort of stuff. So we try and keep on top of that queue roughly bi-weekly so that we can make sure that the count is actually accurate. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that when we're talking about, you know, all these features and cool things that I'm discussing, things that are critical bugs always take precedence over that. So like one of the major things that I think we're going to get wrapped up before 8.5 ships is we made a change in 8.4 to address a data integrity problem to make it so that if you were using multilingual and workflow at the same time, you couldn't like accidentally delete any data. But that had an unintended behavioral effect, which was like if you're the kind of site that has multiple translations of a thing on the go, multiple people working on that, it no longer functions the way it's supposed to because you can only have one active revision for each translation. And so there's been a ton of work on that aspect of the system as well, which doesn't get covered in a shiny presentation like this. But so I would say when core committers are adjusting their time and how they're spending it, it's always the critical bugs first, then the product management roadmap, and then majors after that, and then kind of everything else as it filters in. We've also grown the core committee team by an astronomical amount. There's 13 of us now, versus like when Dries and I ran Drupal 7, it was just the 2 of us. So, and that has helped a lot as well, in that we have some people who focus mainly on pulling down the technical debt, catching bugs before they happen and that kind of thing. That's spread out now over more subject matter experts, and so it doesn't have to be one person that kind of tries to know everything. So it's harder to slip in a bug now than it was in the past, but we still find them despite that. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but it is definitely something we spend a lot of time talking about, because we want there to be a balance. We want people to get the new shiny things, but also for stuff to work properly. And so yeah. So for the most part, though, I would say like critical and major bugs in particular are ones that get a lot of core committer attention and focus. And then the normal stuff kind of just happens like whenever you're in a, let's look at the RTBC queue and see what's in there right now. Those kind of get filtered in along the way. Yeah, it looks like we have a lot of things that are RTBC right now for about a week. So hopefully we will get to that. We're trying to cram as much as we can only get in before beta, because beta ships next Wednesday. So you'll see those numbers bumped up a little bit while we shift gears to the feature stuff, but features gets cut off on Tuesday. Then we'll be scrolling back in the let's make it stable and performance and all that kind of stuff in time for the March release.
Yeah, you did answer it. And then the larger question, how does a project this large handle the fact that there are going to be lots of people using the code and they're going to find more problems? And it always seems like you can never really win. The rate of bug discovery is probably always going to be greater than the rate of bug quashing.
Right. And also just like
system, you're only getting probably a portion of the most critical ones looked at, and meanwhile this big backlog keeps growing. Yeah.
And I think also we don't have like the Views module for a while had like a bug squad, and their job was just to, because Views was the most popular module before it got put in the Drupal core. So every random person would show up there filing bugs, not bothering to search to see if it had already been filed before, like this kind of thing. And the bug squad kind of smashed on top of that so that it kept the queue nice and, this is what's actually a problem. We don't have people doing that before, just because of the scope of the amount of bugs that there are. I would love some upstart to like do that kind of work, but that's not currently where we're at. And so I guess I don't get fussed by those numbers just because I know some portion of those are going to be invalid duplicates. Only happens on your system, not for the general public. I think the main important thing there is that the ones that are bad and are biting people in the butt actively are getting prompt attention. I do feel like that's happening.
Yeah, sounds like it. Okay, thanks.
Yep, thank you for the question.
All right, we've got another question here.
It's more not a question, but an observation for updating to Drupal 8.5. There's a couple Symfony components, specifically var dumper, and they've done a slight compatibility break in the 3.3 branch. They upped their PHP minimum to either 5.5.9 or 7.0.8 from just plain 5.5.9 or 7. This can be a problem if you are running old PHP 7. Honestly, you should not be running that, but I was actually just doing a release recently and found that a client site is running PHP 7.0.2, so my local worked fine. Release to the testing server, and nope, it doesn't work.
Yep. Speaking of PHP 7, we have this issue at, there we go. So you can see it, 2938725, where we are trying to track that, like what version of PHP 7 different hosts are running. So we can try to be, we can try to get out in front of weird issues like that, because I think we weren't out in front of that particular one that you're mentioning, and we want to be going forward. So we're trying to look at all of the different, you know, hosts, what versions that they track, that kind of stuff. So that could be a helpful place to give us information like that. In theory, the like automatic updates, or not the automatic updates, we don't have automatic updates yet, but the update manager server will track that information, but we don't have like necessarily permission to share that information out, and so it's kind of a black box over there. But for people who want to self-report, that would be really handy, so that we can try and get out in front of things like that when we're about to ship a major version, or sorry, a minor release of Drupal, like an 8.5, 8.6. But yeah, thanks for sharing your heartaches. We really do try to catch that kind of stuff. That's why it's super important that when an alpha is tagged, which there is one right now, for Drupal 8.5, no, not that, that people test it and report back what they're seeing. Because then we can hopefully catch those things and throw a backwards compatibility layer in, or whatever we need to do, subclassing, that kind of stuff, prior to the release going out, and then hopefully it won't bite anyone in production.
Cool. Any other questions? I wanted to ask if someone in the back next to the Sprint and BOF whiteboard, if you could grab a pen. And Angie, if people were so inclined and they wanted to sprint on some things, let's write down some of these projects that might be something good for folks to maybe sprint on this weekend. No promises, but we'll put it on the whiteboard and see if anybody bites.
Sure. So layout builder, I think the blocker there is pretty much not something people...
We kind of lost your audio, so hold on one second.
Oh, that's because, yes. How's that?
Yeah, that's better.
Better when I'm not rubbing my pants on microphone. So anyway, for layout builder, we've got this one issue left. This issue is number, this is so weird doing this like in front of a room on a presentation. I do this a lot, but it's more
No, for sure.
293.
293-374-83.
No, sorry, 293-7483.
Sorry, I'll let Angie speak.
No, it's okay. I think my mouse was like covering in a weird way. So this is the one last blocker before we can declare Layout Builder beta ready, which means we could ship it in a stable release such as 8.5 if it was ready in time. And it's a huge patch. It's like 570K or something last time I looked at it. So I don't know that it would be worth like throwing someone who's never looked at this before into this issue, but
You're not a novice issue.
definitely not a novice issue. But if you've worked with layout systems like panels, display suite, that kind of thing, and have some feedback on the API that they're attempting to build, that might be cool to get that information. There are some novice-y things though in the Umami demo blocker, so let me talk about that more. So this one, the easiest thing to do is to bring up a list of issues with the Umami beta blocker tag. Umami is U-M-A-M-I. That's the name of, excuse me, the food website that is based off of. Because last I looked, this had some design and usability stuff, more so than any kind of development stuff. So you can see it's like finalize the design for the toolbar warning message, finalize the wording about the profile on the install screen, and this kind of thing. Because essentially what we're doing is we're shipping an experimental profile. We've never done that before. We've shipped experimental modules, but we've never shipped an experimental profile. And so we're a little worried about this because that means we could make changes to it later on that would break your site if your site were built off of this thing. What we really want you to do with it is install it, poke around for 20 minutes, and then delete it and do what you were going to do with Drupal in the first place. So this one would greatly benefit from people who aren't neck deep in this, looking at, reading through the issues, seeing what their concerns are, and whether or not the proposed text and and things like that match what you think they could. So this is actually like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish issues that people could look at, and particularly if you have a UI, UX, design, documentation background at all, that would be a great area to focus on here. So.
Sweet.
Yep. And then what was oh, this one, yeah. Is this one still a blocker? Let's find out. I made these slides like late last night. Well, I didn't make them, but I updated them late last night. And so sometimes these are not. Yeah, okay. So this one is the one remaining blocker. This is 293, 6293. This is the one remaining blocker before we can turn media on in the, or allow people to turn media on themselves in the modules listing page. It's not great. It's a super not, doesn't feel good kind of patch. Let me see if there's a screenshot anywhere, yeah. Where basically it's basically augmenting in any reference field with a whole bunch of help text that explains what's going on here, which isn't the best, but it is what it is, and would allow us to at least get that unblocked so that the media is just chugging along. So this one, it looks like, is blocked on test failures. So if someone wants to like look into why that has test failures, I think the code itself is going to be relatively straightforward. Like it's mainly adding help text, although it looks like it's doing some other things too. So I guess if you have form API experience, theming experience, have used media before, that kind of stuff, this might be a good place for people to help out as well.
Awesome. So we've got those on the board, so maybe we'll have some people from the summit helping out on that. We've got one more question for you, it looks like.
Okay.
Hey, Angie, it's Mike Madison.
Hey, Mike.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. So I wondered in upcoming releases of Drupal if the core maintainers were planning on doing anything to Drupal.org or Drupal 8 itself to encourage more people to use Composer instead of tarballs.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a whole initiative around that. So as I mentioned earlier briefly, Composer, for people who don't know. Well, Mike, maybe, oh, you're sitting down already, so I have to do this. Okay. Composer is a way of tracking dependencies. So like, for example, if we went to Drupal's Git repository, that's weird. Okay, anyhow. It's going to have this. That's really odd. Don't know why that. All right, we're going to go to GitHub then instead. Because what I'm trying to do is not that hard. It's just click on this. And pop open. I think this is a better example. Composer.json. So this is what the composer.json looks like, and it basically says, here's all the stuff that I need in order to install myself. So that can be things like PHP requirements, that can be things like external libraries that I want to download, or pretty much anything that you want. It's kind of similar to a Drush makefile if people have used those in other distributions. But this is kind of the de facto way of declaring your dependencies as a PHP application. So we do use Composer, as you can see, this is in there. But this method, where you itemize carefully all of the things in your site, does not work at all with the method of, like, if I go to Drupal projects, I don't know, web form, and I download a, you know, like a tar.gz or a zip file of this thing, that's not tracked in Composer, and so now you have like these competing things trying to control your site and what's what and that kind of stuff. So the question was, is there any initiative happening around that whole project? And the answer is yes, there is. This isn't Drupal core, this is Drupal org. Most of this stuff is Drupal org stuff. Composer this thing. I don't know. I might need to get back to you on what the tags and stuff are. Well, this looks like kind of the stuff. Anyway, so this is all going to be tracked in the Drupal org repository. What they're planning on doing is stuff like on this downloads table, in addition to offering the tarball download, also have a little copy and paste command to like add this to your Composer file if you're doing Composer. And then possibly eventually supplanting making it like so that the composer one is really big and the tile is really small, and that kind of stuff. To try to encourage people to use that route. There's a couple of blockers in the way of recommending it as a best practice. One of them is that Contrib doesn't use semantic versioning. So like semantic versioning is that 3-digit 8.5.0 versioning that we use, because you'll see that all over the place in one of these files. But Contrib does not have that concept. And so they need to do some kind of a mapping there to get that working. I know that was one of the blockers. I think another blocker was, what are we going to do about people who either can't or won't use the command line? Because right now they can use the update manager module, just click a button and install a module and they're done. So how do we replicate that functionality in a composer world is another kind of huge blocker. And there's at least 2 big issues talking about that in the Drupal core queue, I think. Or maybe the ideas queue. So the bottom line is it's a bit of a mess right now. But there are a lot of people working and thinking about this, and I want to say on the Drupal.org roadmap, that one, that this is something. Yeah. Yeah, I think all of this is kind of related under the same thing. So supporting the core initiative for automatic updates is going to, by necessity, require us to figure the composer thing out, because that's the only sensible way to do automatic updates is composer update, blah, and then work with core to support site builders continue using without command line access is sort of the other aspect of that. So the DA, the Drupal Association, is planning to get involved in this in some sort of capacity. And it's a matter of, sort of like how we're going to map all that together. I would say if this is something that you're really passionate about and or you have time to work on, the automatic updates team doesn't actually have a team behind it right now. It has like a bunch of individuals who really care about this issue, and so I've seen a lot of ideas, but I haven't seen someone kind of put forth a cohesive plan, like the kind of thing that we would have in the Drupal ideas queue, which would get this visibility and stuff like that. So something like this for the REST API, where it's like, here's what we need to do. We need to solve these things for any use case. We've also got to do this thing, that kind of stuff. I don't know what that looks like for automatic updates, and I think that's probably the first step, is getting together some people who know Composer and have a vision of how it should work, bearing in mind all of these different things we have to keep track of, and then creating like a central plan issue around that would be super helpful. Because in lieu of that, there's a bunch of kind of disjointed conversations happening here, there, and everywhere. And I think that there's people who are on some of those disjointed conversations in the room right now. So if you guys wanted to sprint on that, that would be fantastic. I love it, just like giving you guys all this stuff to do. I don't even bother to show up, but I'm like, here's a bunch of work. But it is really important, crucial work for the projects and that kind of thing. But the bottom line is core developers, or core communities, core developers are on board with Composer being the de facto standard way of doing things. The DA is definitely on board with that. But we've got to somehow allow for people who don't have command line access to work. And that's been the really tricky part, because the commerce guys have tried many different things. They've tried like a desktop application. They've tried something called Ludwig. They've tried, those might be the same thing, I'm not sure. They've tried, I don't know, like embedding Composer in the modules UI and all kinds of different things. And each one is run into its own challenges. So we haven't quite cracked that code yet. But yeah, so I don't know that that helps, but that's to put your mind at ease. Yes, we really want to see that solved and maybe an initiative around it. So hopefully that will happen soon.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Ryan Aslett is actually here.
Great. Go on Ryan. Don't ask me.
Go on Ryan, right there. If you're curious about this issue and this problem and you want to chat about it.
Yeah, Ryan, do you have a recommendation of where the one tag or whatever is that people should follow if they're interested in this stuff? Because I don't actually know that. Or that might be a silly question.
It's in the ideas queue.
Yeah.
New issue? Oh, there's a new issue in the ideas queue. Is it the automatic updates initiative
It must be this thing.
Is that what it's called?
Site Builder Tool Browser Initiative?
It's that one. So related initiatives, is it that one?
Got it. Nice. I learned something new in this conversation.
We're here.
Excellent.
Excellent. Are there any other questions or comments? I've got a runner down to the banquets manager to make sure our coffee is refilled. So it would be great if someone had like one more question. Or I'm going to have to go hide in Trillium Lake. Thank you, Angie, so much. I really appreciate it. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you. I'm really sorry to miss you all this weekend, but have a blast, and hopefully I'll catch some of you in Nashville. So.
Yes. Come to DrupalCon Nashville, see you in person. I really appreciate Angie's flexibility and you all having flexibility. I think it's really great that we can support each other this way, and family is really important and health is important, and I'm so glad that we could accommodate, in technology being what it is, that we could accommodate Angie here. So thank you, Angie, so much, and thank you all. Hopefully there's some coffee left, and coffee is happening. Chris is waving his hand at me. Or are you just waving? Oh, he's being friendly. He's waving at you. Yeah. So, yeah. So everyone wave to Angie. Say thank you.
Hold on. Keep waving. I want to take a screenshot.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you all so much. We do have a break now until 3 p.m. I believe. You can check your schedules. And so we've got 2 more time slots for sessions. And then trivia night is tonight at Puppet Labs. There's information in your schedule booklet about that. Doors will open at 6:30. And that is open to the Drupal community. If you have local Drupal friends who couldn't make it to the summit, but they want to come out to trivia night, they're welcome. So please feel free to come tonight, and form your teams of 4, and trivia will start at 7:30 sharp. And we are in need of 1 or 2 people to help judge trivia. So if you are interested in judging tonight, sitting up at a table and looking haughtily down at the people below, then please come see Jacob Perry. Thank you so much.